I want to just start this show. I sympathize with Donald Trump. I had a group called Media Matters. I had another group called People for the American Way. They taped every single word that I said, and I did about 10,000 broadcasts. I did that many ad-libs, and every time they would take my words and transpose. They would take connectors out, and then they would put it out. And there was somebody in the AP who was one of their clones, and they picked up, and across the country would come these idiotic statements. The same thing's being done to Trump now.
Take your statement out of context.
Out of context, twist it around, and then throw it out. Robertson just said, and around the world, it was. So they're doing it to Trump now. There's a whole team of people just looking for every word he speaks to make him look silly. What he said yesterday, I think, or the day before, whatever, the Second Amendment crowd will come, and give me a hand. And what he's talking about are those who are concerned about gun control, and what he's saying, a new Supreme Court judge. It's been virtually a tie on it, and the next time they put a liberal judge on, they'll be reversing the Second Amendment. And so he said the Second Amendment. So what his opponents are saying, well, Donald Trump is encouraging people to shoot Hillary. I mean, it's just nonsense.
Oh, unbelievable.
Yeah,
That's
and Joe Biden, they got a
ridiculous.
Joe Biden quote who was talking about guns, and he was making a joke of it. But there's no joking in this. They won't let you joke. They won't. And every time they're going to twist the word, and I know what it's like. He has my profound sympathy, but these people are profound liars, and they're set up as liars. And the devil is a liar and the father of lies, according to the Bible.
And there's such a double standard.
Total double standard. I mean, they'll give a break to the Democrats every time, and whatever. Well, she really meant this.
Yeah.
But he didn't mean any such thing, but they twist the words. So anyhow, Donald, you have my sympathy, buddy. Well, we're seeing a new and stronger relationship between two countries. It has a tremendous prophetic significance. Russia and Turkey. That's the way it looks. After the president of Turkey met with Vladimir Putin in Russia this week.
That visit could have historic implications, especially as the Turkish president continues his crackdown after a recent coup attempt. George Thomas brings us the story.
For centuries, their two countries were arch enemies. But this week in St. Petersburg, Russia's President Vladimir Putin and Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan decided they could no longer afford a Cold War.
I see this visit as a start of a new era in our bilateral relations.
The new beginning has caught some in the capitals of Europe and Washington by surprise.
Your visit, despite the very difficult political situation in Turkey, shows that we all want our dialogue to be resumed and our relations to be restored for the sake of the Russian and Turkish people.
Both countries tried to forge closer ties in the past, but were undone by the war in Syria. Putin backed Syria's Bashar al-Assad, while Erdogan supported his enemies.
They still cannot agree on what they can do in Syria.
Then last November, Turkey shot down a Russian warplane that it said had violated its airspace on the Syrian border. Putin called Erdogan a backstabber and demanded an apology. Erdogan refused. Putin retaliated by imposing trade sanctions, which cost Turkey billions of dollars.
For example, 98% of the Russian tourists has been lost, which was a huge number for the Turkish economy. And also some very important economic projects, such as the Turkish Stream natural gas pipeline or Turkey's first nuclear power plant, they had to be postponed.
But the recent failed coup in Turkey appears to have precipitated a reset in relations. Erdogan alarmed the West by arresting nearly 18,000 people on suspicion of trying to overthrow his government. Tens of thousands of others lost their jobs for backing the coup. Some Turks even blamed the US for orchestrating the uprising. Putin, on the other hand, supported Erdogan during the coup, causing strain in relations between US and Russia and US and Turkey. While some worry Russia and Turkey's new friendship could be bad news for the West.
If any country gets closer to Russia, it becomes a reason for panic. It's a basis for countermeasures.
Others welcome a possible new alliance.
The EU and America want to isolate Russia. Turkey is also isolated by some European countries. So improved relations between Russia and Turkey are good for both sides.
George Thomas, CBN News.
Ladies and gentlemen, read the Bible. Get a copy of the Bible and look at the 38th chapter of the book of the prophet Ezekiel and see what it says. In the latter days, a coalition of forces is coming against Israel. It talks about Gog and Magog and all these strange things, and there's one country called Gomer. Well, where is that located? It's in Turkey. Most of those countries in the Gog and Magog are in Turkey. And then you've got Rosh, which means head in Hebrew. And it's not Russia, it's Rosh, the head. And the Caucasian Muslim territories of Russia joining together with Turkey, joining together with Iran in a coalition against Israel. It's like in the front pages of the paper. It's there. Read it in the Bible. And this is not some happy time if there's a rapprochement between Turkey and Russia. That's prophetically significant. Well, here at home, they're fighting it out. Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton both dealing with controversies on the campaign trail. Here's John Jessup.
That's right, Pat. Hillary Clinton's campaign says she disavows any support from the father of the terrorist in Orlando. Sadiq Mateen was spotted on stage seated behind Clinton at a campaign rally this week in Florida. His son, Omar Mateen, massacred 49 people at an Orlando gay nightclub back in June. The campaign says Mateen's father was not invited. And Donald Trump is under attack for a remark he made about Clinton, judges, and the Second Amendment.
Hillary wants to essentially abolish the Second Amendment. By the way, and if she gets to pick her judges, nothing you can do, folks. Although the Second Amendment people, maybe there is, I don't know. But I'll tell you what, that will be a horrible day.
Critics accuse Trump of calling for violence against Clinton, but Pat, the Trump camp says he was just referring to the powerful political clout of people who support the right to own guns.
Well, he's been backed by the NRA, and the NRA is extremely powerful. There is no question about it. Now, tomorrow, this is significant. For years, and I mean years, I have been campaigning against what's called the Johnson Amendment. And I thought that was like a settled issue after a while. Lyndon Johnson, when he was president, jammed through a provision in the IRS code, 501c3, that prohibited nonprofits from having anything to do with politics. And it was put through without committee vetting. It was put through without the necessary approval of all the parties involved. It was just jammed through. And it's been lying there, and I've done everything I could possibly do to try to talk conservatives into changing it, and they won't do it. So Trump says, I wonder where in the world he picked up the Johnson Amendment, but he's done it, and I think, my goodness, I'll congratulate you for it and applaud you, because this has been a club that the IRS, somebody like Lois Lerner, could use to beat the nonprofits into submission. Now, the ACLJ, the American Center for Law and Justice, just won a major victory in the D.C. Circuit, which forces the IRS to litigate the failure to grant tax exemption to a whole lot of conservative groups, the Tea Party and others, that they have been targeting, the IRS has been targeting. The IRS is now going to have to answer in damages, and it can be millions of dollars. So it was a major victory for our legal group. Well, Trump is going to meet with pastors tomorrow, hundreds of pastors in Orlando. CBN News, the Brody File, broke the story, noting the Republican nominee will be speaking about his effort to repeal the Johnson Amendment. Can you believe that? I mean, I have done everything. If he gets it done, I mean, he'll deserve a place in some hallowed ground. I don't know what it is.
Amen. Well, I think John has more with that.
That's right. CBN News broke the news about the CBN News' The Brody File broke that story, noting the Republican nominee will be speaking about his effort to repeal the Johnson Amendment. That law, which has been in place for decades, has made it difficult for pastors to speak openly about political candidates from the pulpit. CBN's Jenna Browder will be interviewing Trump at the event, and we'll have that report on Friday's 700 Club, with early excerpts posted tomorrow on our website at cbnnews.com. Well, the Washington State high school football coach fired last year for praying at midfield after games is filing a lawsuit against the school district. Coach Joe Kennedy is not asking for monetary damages. He's simply requesting to be reinstated back into Bremerton schools. Last October, Kennedy was put on administrative leave for praying in public at games. His attorneys argue the school district violated his First Amendment rights. Coach Kennedy says he just wants to get back to doing what he loves the most. Well, that case is just one of many involving Christians and religious freedom in America. A recent survey found that almost 2/3 of Americans believe Christians face growing intolerance, while at the same time, the poll also found that Christians complain too much. Heather Sells shows us how this is playing out in the church.
Most Christians are all too familiar with real threats to their religious liberty. They range from wedding vendors who want the right to refuse a gay ceremony to faith-based colleges fighting California lawmakers who want to strip them of their ability to hold religious convictions. Biola University President Barry Corey says Christian colleges must be able to maintain their beliefs.
The bill says you can have standards of housing and you can have standards of conduct, but we can't enforce them because they would be discriminatory.
Christians have felt and fought these threats for years, and now new research shows that almost 2/3 of Americans also understand this growing intolerance.
That's not a fringe belief. That's the majority American belief.
Within the church, believers are still coming to terms with this intolerance, what it means in daily life.
And the Bible says, in this life, you will have troubles. You will have persecutions. Let me tell you, that time is here.
I think there's no question that evangelicals think that in one way they've kind of lost their home field advantage.
Another challenge for the church is that most young people don't buy the intolerance argument. Only 40% agree that it's true. Lifeway also found that 4 in 10 Americans believe Christians complain too much about how they're treated. 19-year-old Faith Haley often sees religion used as a political weapon.
I've seen a lot of hate and a lot of anger, and that is really upsetting, especially when it's done in the name of God.
So Christians see an opportunity by striking a delicate balance. Help the public understand the need for religious freedom without coming across as whiners. That's why President Corey recently wrote Love Kindness to encourage Christians towards greater civility while maintaining their convictions.
We want to lead with grace and kindness.
More and more Christian leaders believe this kind of appeal is necessary in a time when so many understand so little about what it means to follow Christ. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Thanks, Heather. Pat, a sign of the changing times.
Well, here's what's been happening, ladies and gentlemen. We started, at least the Christians did, public schools. They were started under Martin Luther, who wanted to have an educated populace to read the Bible. And so the church was the womb, if you will, out of which the public education came. Every single constitution of each one of our 50 states, every one mentions God. Every single constitution mentions God. And as Zorak versus Clausen was a famous Supreme Court case where Justice William O. Douglas said, we are a religious people whose institutions presuppose the existence of a supreme being. Now, the Supreme Court, 5 unelected guys, have been put into a position where they have radically changed the concepts that we have of religion. And this whole matter of separation of church and state, they say, well, you can't object to that. That's separation of church and state. And you say, well, how to baptize people? That's something we do in the church. And they say, no, we're going to tell you how to do that. Marriage has been a sacrament of the church. Now the Supreme Court has said, oh, no, your view of marriage is wrong. We're going to tell you how to do it. The whole idea of welfare has been charity in the Christian church. Now, the secular state has moved in, and the biggest place where it's moved in is in education of the young. And that was a province of the church for so many years. And what's happened is the secular state has moved in and crowded out the religious believers. And then they come back and they say, well, we want what's been taken away from us. And they say, well, and the people say, well, you're just a bunch of whiners. Keep your mouth shut. Well, Donald Trump said, interestingly enough, he said, you guys have got the majority. Why don't you use it? What's wrong with you? You've got the majority. Exercise it. Well, if you don't show up to vote, and if you don't know what you're doing, if you're not informed on the issues, then they're going to take it away from you. But well-informed electorate can make a huge difference. So this is the time. If there was ever a time to register to vote, this is it. Time to register to vote and to make sure your vote counts, because otherwise they're going to run all over you. John?
Thanks, Pat. Get this, in health news, if you want to live longer, pick up a book. A recent study from Yale University found people who read books had a 20% less chance of dying over the next 12 years compared to people who didn't. And the Washington Post also reports book readers lived almost 2 years longer than non-readers. The study concluded just like a healthy diet and exercise, books appear to promote a, quote, significant survival advantage. Pat, time to fire up those tablets.
I have Kindle. I like Kindle. And I call my secretary who knows how to access Kindle. I don't know how to access it, but I said, well, you get me some books. So I'm reading about 3 books a week, and you know, I read them so fast. I mean, you just turn the page, and she's got a little thing, a little tablet.
This surprises me. I figured you were, you know, a paperback or a hardback guy.
I was a hardback guy, but the other, I mean, you can't buy that many books.
That's true.
I mean, and you can get them so cheaply on Kindle. So you call up and say, I want the following 3 titles, 4 titles, or whatever, and they put them on your iPad. Then you start reading them, and
yeah.
I read them so fast.
And it doesn't take any space up on your bookshelf, so.
I'm guaranteed to live 150. That's what I'm working.
You got so many books to read, so little time. That's awesome.
Anyhow, if book reading will do it, thank goodness, that's a lot easier than having to exercise all the time.